On today's podcast, we talk with former A&R executive and artist manager Alex Shenitsky. It was a very interesting conversation. Alex has been in major label A&R. He's also worked for independent labels. He worked for John Varvatos Records. He has been in the business for many years, and now he's managing artists. He brought a very interesting perspective in terms of understanding the market today, what it takes to manage an act today. We talk about international markets. We talk about what are the factors that he looks for in talent that he's going to take on. He talked about what the responsibility of the artist is today in beginning their own career and how that has so dramatically changed from, when he was doing A&R. Really, really great conversation with a lot of great points that I think you'll find a lot of wisdom in. Insiders, are you ready? Welcome to MUBUTV's Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage artists and music business professionals who are dedicated to having a successful career in the new music industry. Here are your hosts, Ritch, Esra, and Eric Knight. Welcome back, Insiders, to another episode of the MUBUTV Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage your music career. On today's episode, we're with Alex Shenitsky, former major label A&R executive and now an artist manager, who discusses what are the realities in working with and building the careers of new artists in this new era. But first, a quick word from our sponsor.
Hey, Insiders, are you looking to take your music career to the next level? Then you need to know about the Music Business Registry. The Music Business Registry is the leading music industry publisher of the most up-to-date contact information for major and independent record label A&R, music publishers, artist managers, music attorneys, music supervisors, and much, much more. The Music Business Registry is the trusted industry standard and source serving the music business community for over 28 years with the most accurate and up-to-date contact information available. Their titles include the A&R Registry, the Film and Television Music Monthly, the Music Publisher Registry, and the Music Attorney Registry. All of their publications are available in print, PDF, CSV, or online subscription. Visit them now at musicregistry.com and receive a 10% discount by using coupon code MUBUTV10 at checkout. That's musicregistry.com, coupon code MUBUTV10.
Welcome back, Insiders. Today's featured interview is with Alex Shenitsky, a former A&R executive at Island Def Jam, Stolen Recordings, EMI Music Publishing, a guy who's had a lot of extensive knowledge of the way that the business ran and, most interestingly, the way that it operates today. Alex is now independent. He's, doing a lot of very interesting things, and he had a great discussion with Eric and I about the way that the business operates today and the challenges and the, insights that I think a lot of you artists out there who are trying to build careers are going to find very, very interesting.
Yeah, I thought that this was a great interview, and what I liked is the whole journey that he went from being an A&R into, music publishing and now transitioning into artist management. So I think a lot of our insiders out there are going to get a lot of great value out of this.
Absolutely. I totally agree. A lot of the things that he talked about were that transition of the way things, the way that obviously things were and the way that they operate now, which, as I said, I believe a lot of artists are going to find very, very valuable, the kinds of insight that someone from the inside can bring to that.
So Insiders, sit back, relax, and enjoy our featured interview with Alex Shenitsky.
Thank you so much, Alex, for doing this. I really appreciate it.
No problem. I'm happy to be doing this with you guys.
I wanted to ask you, do you remember, sort of going back to the beginning of your life, do you remember when in your life that you knew that the music business was going to be your career path?
I remember when I realized there was a music business behind these bands that I was seeing. I remember, getting a little bit of a glimpse back, behind the scenes with some bands that I was around that kind of got bigger. And, I was like, well, who's that guy on the bus? And they're like, well, that's our manager and that's our tour manager. And it's like, oh, those are like real jobs. Like you can actually manage, you idiots. And that's like, you get paid for it. So that, and that was probably around 16 years old. And so, I was 15, 16 years old. And, from then on, I kind of always dabbled in booking shows, from then managing my friends' bands, going on the road, selling merch, all those things you do.
Great. This is Eric, by the way. Thank you so much, Alex, for joining us. You've worked in A&R music publishing and artist management for almost 15 years now. What are the most significant changes you've seen since you've started? And, how was it and how has it changed in terms of the marketplace today?
I mean, I think the biggest change that for A&R, is really just the way you find music now. It's just simply, the evolution of technology. Before all this stuff we had, you actually had to go to shows and you listen to demo tapes and you didn't necessarily know. And now you see it all before you actually even have to see it in person, and you kind of know what you're getting yourself into. Other than that, the creative aspects of making records and doing deals and working with just people, those things don't really change too much. I think really it's just how we find the stuff, really.
It's interesting in terms of finding it. One of the things that I've seen, and you're sort of in the thick of this, is that, do you find that today artist managers have more responsibility in terms of the development process of new talent than they did in the past?
Yes. The role of the manager is definitely become, you do everything. You're there, you usually have to get in early and be an early believer where, other facets of the business, you don't always do that. Managers tend to be the first ones in and help, connect a lot of the dots that artists need help with, especially this day and age where there's a lot of dots to connect, more than there used to be. And then, I think, but then again, it also is it's giving power back to the artists because there's so many more opportunities that managers are able to help tap into that they weren't able to before, where they didn't need a label, or they don't need a label necessarily at their stage of the game. Managers are labels. Managers are the booking agent. They're the promoter. They're all these things. I think for the first 75% of an artist's career, I think.
Which sort of gets me into the whole thing that, as you're speaking about that, I'm realizing that not only the responsibilities, but you're also talking about the actual level that an artist themselves needs to be at. In terms of that process, that so much of that has been put back not only on the manager to create those opportunities, but on the artists themselves creatively.
Yeah, I think now the responsibility has shifted a bit. Where it used to be like, you get signed and you look at the label and say, what are you going to do? And I think there's still an element of that. Of course, that labels bring huge value in lots of areas. But I think warranting it and getting to a point where you need those services, because there's so much in between now. There's so much, there's a huge space for artists to live that, aren't necessarily on a major label, or in this mainstream space. There's a lot of in between now. It's because everyone can put out music. Managers, you could be partners with a manager and have a successful career and never, really be with a quote unquote label.
Let me ask you, Alex, has streaming altered what can or can't break in today's marketplace?
Has it changed what can or can't break? I don't think so. I think, at least I'd like to believe, at the end of the day, like the cream rises to the top and the best stuff, I think the ability for these different avenues for ears to find music is so great that I do believe that the stuff, that's not that there's a lot of great music that doesn't get discovered. That happens a lot too. But I do think, generally speaking, the avenues are all there. So I think if anything, it's opening more doors for more songs to get more exposure than it ever had, than there has ever been. There's a lot of slots on the internet.
No, but that's precisely the point. It's interesting hearing you, coming from your experience, because, I look at things like, Billie Eilish. I look at some of these AWOL artists who are not necessarily household names. Billie Eilish is somebody who's known within the business. And what's fascinating to me about her was that she seems to be maybe the exception to this, is that no one, no matter how much interest there was in those 13 songs she put out before this album, none of them were hit records. None of them got any radio play, but they made an enormous impact to her audience. So much so that when that album came out, there wasn't only interest in it for a minute. There was real interest in her as an artist. And you know better than anyone that there's an enormous difference between the ability to break a record and the ability to break an artist. And what they managed to do was to break an artist, and then radio seemed to follow. And that's why I was asking that question about, do you think that there's a big difference in what can break, what Eric was talking about? Because it seems like the success radio or streaming play or whatever forced radio onto the record, that the streaming did that as opposed to vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, but I think, I think that sort of scenario has played out. It has played out before, just a little bit differently, not necessarily streaming, but when when in the early days, working around Fall Out Boy, they were touring around the country. They were playing arenas in markets, and they weren't getting radio play. And the promo guys would literally go to the station and be like, "Look, they're selling out arenas in your market. It's already happening." And kind of forced radio to have to pay attention to them. I think that even happened with, a lot with Motley Crue, but streaming has definitely been the new, almost the new live show in a way, in this sense.
Alex, as a veteran executive in A&R and in publishing and in management, I'm curious, do you find that new artists today or new acts are more savvy and knowledgeable about their chosen career path than in previous eras, in your experience?
Yes, they have to be. I think it's a necessary thing, and I think it's one of the things a lot of artists struggle with, is having to be more business savvy than they'd like to be. Hopefully you get to a point where you can just focus on your music, and you have a manager and people that help deal with all this other stuff, and you really can just focus on the music. But even at that point, the top level artists, they still have to do the social media game. They still have to do these things and be somewhat knowledgeable about it. It's definitely part of it. I think with getting the power comes with responsibility.
Yeah, it's something that I'm always emphasizing to artists, is that, in the revolution that we've gone through in the last 18 years, it's more important than ever, because there's so much new information and new knowledge that they need to do. It's not an era, unfortunately, where they can just focus on their music and leave all of that to someone else. There is no someone else. As you were pointing out at the beginning of the career, it's like so much of that has to be their responsibility. And this is a sea change that I see, is that where a lot of artists are very resistant to it, or don't realize. And I'm sure you're on the front lines of that. I mean, a lot of artists they're not as quick to realize, my God, this is my life. This is my career. I can't just turn this over to someone else.
Yeah. Because this social media stuff and all this stuff, the personal touch, it matters. You can't really phone that stuff in authentically. I have this conversation with artists I manage, regularly, where they're like, they don't really want to do this or that. And, hopefully, people have someone, a manager or a friend that can, point them at a few things and be like, this is really cool, something that you do, hopefully, help steer them in the right direction and help them find a way to enjoy it and realize what they're sharing with the world is their unique perspective, which I think is, at the end of the day, what everyone's trying to hopefully accomplish by, putting all this stuff out there in social media, is showing their unique perspective on their world. So I think it's important for artists to remember what, it is an important part of what's happening right now. And it is an important part of people understanding your narrative and where you're coming from and what sets you apart from other artists in the same genre,
Exactly. And I think it's another important point that me and Ritch are always talking about, the great manager, Andy Gould, saying that, I can't want it more than they do. So if they can't realize from the get-go that they got to get off their ass and get on it, that it's just not going to come to them. It's just
Yeah.
not going to happen, you know?
And that's definitely been, I've learned the hard way, and I'm sure Andy Gould had probably got that, perspective from artists that he worked with, that he was passionate about and that had amazing talent, but didn't want to do all the other things. And I've definitely been in that position where I've definitely been like, man, this guy has it all, but I can't want it more than that.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, because, like Andy was saying, I mean, he once said that on a panel that I did. And the truth is, he said, because I can't get up there and write the songs for them.
Right.
I can't get out there and pull them out of bed and make them want to do that. I can't do the shows. He said, when I come across an artist that I feel that way about and I see that quality in them, I run.
That's some really great advice right there. Yeah. I definitely, I could have used a page out of that book a few times earlier on, but.
And I think there's an illusion too with artists that they expect, they see the glamour and the end result of an artist's career and all the success that's come to them. They don't realize the 10 or 15 years of just eating shit day in and day out, getting to that point that it's a career, it's a lifestyle, it's like a job like anything else. And a lot of people, I think, get a wake-up call when they realize, oh shit, I gotta start doing this like a job,
Yeah, and I think they don't realize how hard it is.
Oh
yeah, they don't.
It's harder than probably any other career that you would choose, to take on. So
it is a real grind. I mean, I'm sure it all seems glamorous, but man, the no sleep, the lack of food, the pressure, the ups, the downs, day to day. It's intense. It's an intense career, but but that like Andy said, like I can't do any of that stuff.
Right. Let me ask you, Alex, and I think this is an important one for all our listeners. At what point do you feel, in your estimation, does an artist need management?
I mean, I think it could start at day one. It could. I think that's what needing management can mean. It can mean a lot of different things. It can mean, some people might say you don't need a manager until you're making X amount of dollars a month. To me, I've jumped in on projects day one. I've jumped in on projects that the train has left the station. It really comes down to the music. I think if you're a manager or you're an artist, and if you're a manager and you really believe in an artist and they have the stuff going on that ticks a lot of the boxes, I think it's time for the manager to jump in, whoever that is. I think if you're an artist and you're getting to the point where your music is doing well, people are paying attention, there are people like managers that are actually listening to your stuff, that might be a time to get a manager. If you just started a project and you think that you wrote 3 songs and you think you need a manager now and never played a show, I would say that might not be the best time for a manager. I think if if you can look at yourself honestly and say, things are moving in the right direction, I could use some help, that's the right time.
Yeah. Are you an advocate of that artist? I mean, I'm from the school. I manage acts as well. I mean, I'm on both sides. I'm on the performing and on the management side. So I'm wondering if you can speak to, I think that artists they can be doing this on their own initially. I mean, even if there's nobody coming knocking on their door, which typically there isn't at the very beginning stages. Are you a big advocate that, artists should be just hustling and basically managing things on their own until that time comes when they can't do it anymore?
Yeah, I mean, the artists that I work with that are in their early stages, so to speak, over time, you start to find these character traits in people that you're like, all right, well, this guy is a go-getter, girl, it's a go-getter. They're doing this with or without me. Where I can add value. Those are, whether, even if it's day one, and they have some amazing music and I know that the type of person, I'll get involved because I know they're not just going to be sitting there looking at me like, what are you doing? Like, because it's
right.
It does take a lot of effort. And nowadays, like, people want to hear from the artist. Like, people don't want to talk to some person that it's like, we're all kind of out there on social media. It's like, then all of a sudden you're going to throw someone in the mix, unless you're at that level where it's like, you really need to have someone, buffer your stuff. But like, I don't know. Even when I'm managing an act, I always will push the artist to do the personal touch, because that means more than me reaching out a lot more times than not.
What's interesting in listening to you is that, you're giving the background and the real hardcore scenario of what needs to be done. I mean, that's what Eric's point was. And
yeah.
I guess what's interesting about it, Alex, is that one of the most common misconceptions I come across in my own career with artists over the last 15 years is this erroneous belief: if I have a manager, they will bring my career to me. They will get me a career. They will get, it's like the manager is somehow some sort of
like
silver
Messiah,
bullet.
like a
It's
Messiah. Yeah, like that's going to be the answer to the magic
what
bullet.
I'm missing.
Right.
That's all I'm missing. If I had that, then, everything will just come to me.
And that's not the reality.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same. It's the same with a manager. It's the same with a booking agent. Same with a label. It's no one person is going to be the magic. And if there was that one person, maybe there's a couple of people we could point out in the business, but if there was that one person that was just like, everything turned to gold, I mean, we'd all know about it. Let's put it that way.
Of course, and it's not a reality. Or I remember, back in the day, I used to think, giant managers who handle, superstars can do it. And, mostly you find that those kinds of managers, the Cliff Bernsteins or the Irving Azoffs or whatever, all their time is spent on the one client because, that's what has occupied their whole life.
Yeah.
They don't have time to be dealing with a brand new unknown act.
100%. Yeah. I mean, you're right on with that.
I wanted to ask you, you've worked for a major publisher, you've worked for a major label, as well as an independent joint venture label. And I'm wondering, for our listeners, can you talk about what each of those experiences taught you?
I mean, in the end, I think, just having an entrepreneurial kind of spirit in any facet of this business is going to be helpful, but definitely in A&R. Whether you're at a smaller label, where you don't have all the resources, you have to make things happen. You have to pull favors. You have to get really, really creative. When you're at a bigger company, there's still different struggles, but it may not be your budget. It may just be like getting the attention you need for your artist. It's the internal. Yeah. I mean, that tends to be a lot of it, whether it's the internal struggle on the front side of getting the deal done or the backside or whatever you want to call the front and the backside, getting the record out and then dealing with, all the struggles when working a record within, a big company that has a lot of releases. It all comes down to just being creative and being resourceful and sort of just having an entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, I think you have to have that to succeed in this business right now.
Let me ask you, what is your specific criteria for seriously considering signing an artist today, and how has it evolved over the last several years?
It all really comes down to the songs for me. I think, there's a lot of other stuff, but the main thing is the songs. Nothing else really matters when there's great songs. The production doesn't matter as much. Who's on the team doesn't matter as much. How many followers they have on whatever doesn't matter as much. When the music is really, really great, that's that for me that has to be what it is. Especially for me now, it's like if I don't love it, I can't get excited.
Yeah, it's the foundation of everything. Without that, like Don Grierson, the late great Don Grierson, it all starts with the music. And yeah, we totally agree. We're definitely from that. I think that's the impetus for everything.
I mean, I think if it's not that, then I don't know I think you're not into this for the same reasons that we're into this.
So, Alex, we touched on this before, and I just want to go a little deeper with it in that a lot of the aspects of an artist's creativity, meaning their personal narrative, have become so important today. And I'm wondering, do you see that in terms of the artists that break? I think of, people like Cardi B, people like Ariana Grande, people like Billie Eilish. These people have developed very, very deep connections with their audience based on sort of a deeper level of personal connection about who these people are that's distinct from just their music. And I'm curious, as an A&R executive who's been at this a long time, if you're seeing more of that, and if you feel that artists creatively need to be willing to go there.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you said, as you said, the ones that have seemed to have really broken through have that narrative. And I think, I think it's going beyond the music now. It's where people find this artist and they fall in love with their lyrics, and now they're able to actually find out the story behind it. And from there, this deep connection develops where before we had all this technology, it was a lot harder. But I think now kids and art and people, they're able to dig for more. They want to know. And when there's a real story and there's some, there's something deep that people can relate to. Yeah, I mean, I think that is a big thing, is a big reason why, you're seeing certain artists develop these fanatical fan bases, and breaking through.
Yeah, it's like a certain level of authenticity has to be there, and the audience and the culture today can smell it when there isn't.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's what I think labels have realized that more. And that's why they're looking at things that have kind of already developed, because it's real, it's developed, it's happening, it's authentic. You can't, it's already the train has left the station. And that's when I think these, bigger labels are getting involved now, because I think, for them, it's a better bet. It's a better bet to, go after something that, is real, as opposed to them waste a bunch of money on something that someone just thinks might be good.
Yeah, and this is a great segue into the next question, Alex. With all of the tools available today, like websites, online, social media, streaming, is there a certain level of development or, an expectation of a certain level of market awareness that labels and managers are expecting from new acts before they even get involved?
I mean, I think there's a lot of, you hope for all these things. I think what that is actually evolving. What that means, that whether it's the press or, I think what is significant and moving the needle is kind of constantly changing. So I think that's sort of dictating where things are going. I think whatever the next thing is, if it has to hit a certain level, it's all going to depend on the artist and the songs.
Yeah, it is interesting though. I mean, in following up on Eric's question, it's because your answer, when I think about it, really affects what an artist must or mustn't do in terms of getting themselves visible or getting the attention of a label. And you're right. As I'm listening to you, I'm realizing that goalpost or that criteria seems to shift, more and more and more. And if we get deeper into it, it's also not the same for each genre.
Yeah. It's so changing, and every genre is also changing, and what means something, it's like, is it the cosign from the other artist? Is it the big look on TV? Like, there's artists getting looks on TV that aren't signed and aren't, no one really cares about, or when I say no one cares about, like, labels aren't like chasing them down. It's just interesting to see, what people get excited about or don't get excited about nowadays. I mean, because it just seems to be changing all the time.
What's interesting about listening to you is I remember and right as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking the perfect illustrations of this, and I've gone on the record of saying this before, are these TV talent shows, the American Idols, the Voices. These things are great TV, but they are horrible at delivering talent. You and I can count on one hand, Alex, one hand, how many artists have broken out of American Idol. One hand, okay? We can't name any on even one hand have broken out of The Voice, because none of them have. And what is so interesting is that, you look at how many 17 seasons of American Idol, and we have 3 or 4 artists. It's like Irving Azoff said in an interview. He said it's a whole different process, a whole different route that one must go to break as an artist than it is to just be welcomed into a home as a television star. There's no context, on TV. You can just, present yourself and that's it. But that doesn't mean that when that show ends, that anyone is going to care about you, no matter how many times or how much win you have on those shows. And very few people seem to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, and it extends online to YouTube, and it's like you see something get a lot of views. It's like whatever it is, whether it's a television or whatever, like a show on YouTube or like a music video. It's real easy for people to click once and it's free, but it's another thing to go buy a concert ticket,
exactly,
buy a T-shirt, and be invested as a fan. It's a big difference. So I think we see that, and I think that it is misleading. You see things that have all these big numbers, and you think that it should be the biggest thing in the world, but it doesn't mean that they're all going to be Justin Bieber. Clearly,
Yeah, and they're equating apples with oranges. I wanted to ask you, can you talk about the specific non-creative qualities that you look for in an artist that you're serious about signing or getting involved with? And the reason I ask that, Alex, is you don't have to name names, but I know someone who has the level of experience that you do in this business, has fallen in love with artists, thinks that they're great, loves the music, and for whatever reason, you find out, you know what? This really isn't for me. For whatever reason, and it's usually nothing to do with the level of creativity. So I'm wondering for our listeners, as an executive who's very experienced and now who manages people and puts records out, can you talk about those non-creative qualities that you're looking for?
It's just a level of maturity, I think. It doesn't have to be the strongest work ethic. I just look for people that are mature and realistic. I've dealt with 18-year-olds that are mature and realistic, and I've dealt with 35-year-olds that are not mature and not realistic. So it can really, you never know where you're going to find it, and that can mean a few different things. I mean, I just think, this is a crazy business to be in, and I think you have to be patient and able to roll with the punches. And I think maturity, generally that comes with maturity, the ability to do that. And I think it's just looking for those types of people, because we're going to have really good days. There'll probably be, at least in the beginning, there's going to be more bad days than good days generally, and some worse than others. But it's not going to be. This isn't easy, and I want to be around people that I want to be around. So people that are positive, people that are mature, people that just have are just generally good to be around, good people. Life is too short to be around shitty people. So that kind of plays into my decision making a lot.
Okay. All right, great.
Yeah, going with that question, for artists starting out, how do they identify who their audience is? This is, a crucial one that, a lot of artists, they just don't have a clue about it. And I'm just curious to get your thoughts on that.
I mean, I think it's hard. I think everyone's, I don't think you don't really know who your audience is until it sort of finds you, it seems. We always strategize, and you think about they're there's the obvious playlist that you want to try to get into, and the certain things like that where you're like, if you're, I put out a band. It's like a surf rock band. So it's like, we know we're going to try to go after these like surf rock playlists. It's like, we kind of know that audience a little bit, but it's not always that specific. So I think you don't always know. I think it's you can't pick your audience.
Right. Let me ask you, Alex, are albums even a relevant model today for an unknown artist without a sizable audience? I mean, it seems like we've gone back, the pendulum swung back into like a singles based thing, like back in the 60s and stuff, where there was, or 50s, that singles were just coming out now. And it seems like there's a lot more of it, happening, where you're just seeing a continuous flow versus the traditional album. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
I mean, I think putting out music consistently is definitely I think that's the key now. Whether it's
That's the
putting
trend,
out
yeah,
a song a month, or putting out an EP a month, or putting out an album every 2 months, or you're Drake and you're just putting out hundreds and hundreds of songs. It's I think part of it, to me, in developing artists, when I think about them in 10 years, I try to think about what the career would be. The streaming is going to be is a huge just a revenue model for artists to support themselves. So I think a lot of that is going to come down to how much catalog you have up, for available for people to listen to. And you don't know in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, who's going to stumble upon, and how many thousands of people are going to stumble upon your music. But I think if you're serious about, developing and breaking in some level, whatever that may be, it's not going to, I don't believe it's just going to happen, or you certainly won't have the longevity just releasing one song every once in a while, or one record a year. Like, I think now you need to be doing more than that to be relevant. And if you really want to, again, have a sustainable, revenue, for yourself in the future, you need to have a catalog.
And do you think that's across all genres? Does that speak to all genres? Rock, pop, R&B, hip hop?
I think it's a little different. I think it is different genre to genre. I think, like, hip hop, and pop, hip hop, I think you might see more releases with more songs on them. Rock tends to be a little more formulaic, where, like, it's going to be an EP here, an EP there, maybe an album there. Right. I think there's certain genres that tend to stick to formulas a little bit more, I think. But generally, I think the overall theme is
more creative output.
The consistency, the consistency. Yeah. It's like, I mean, it's hard to break through. As we were saying, there's so many things out there. I think, one of the ways to break through, other than making yourself unique and having, this narrative and distinguishing yourself, I think, is having a quality catalog of music up there. Like we were saying, it all goes back to the music.
Hey, Insiders, we hope that you've been enjoying our featured interview. Stay tuned, because we've got so much more value coming your way. But before we dive back in, a word from our sponsor. Hey, Ritch, you're the founder, CEO, legend of Music Business Registry. Tell us what the Music Business Registry is all about.
Well, what it's about, Eric, is it's a company that is designed to provide the most accurate and up-to-date contact information for the music business. So if someone is looking to reach the A&R community, if someone is looking to reach music publishers, if someone needs to reach artist managers, if someone needs to reach music attorneys, if someone's looking to place their music into film and television and needs to reach all the music supervisors, that's the contact information that we provide. We've been doing it for 28 years. We're sort of the industry standard, if you will, for the music business, and have been serving them since 1992. So that's what we do.
Amazing. So if I wanted to find out, let's say, A&R people from Warner Brothers, let's say, I can just go in there and find that in the A&R registry?
Absolutely. You'll find all of the Warner Brothers in there. You'll find the Warner Brothers in LA, Warner Brothers in New York, Warner Brothers in Nashville, Warner Brothers in London, Warner Brothers, probably in Australia as well. So those are the main territories that we cover.
Amazing. And we're offering all of our insiders right now that are listening, if you visit musicregistry.com and use coupon code MUBUTV10 at checkout, you'll get a 10% discount off your first order. That's musicregistry.com, coupon code MUBUTV10. Anything else you want to say, Ritch?
Well, when you're ready to put your music to work, musicregistry.com. It's interesting as I'm listening to you, I'm remembering a conversation I had with Mike Caron recently, who talked about this very issue that you're addressing, which is that he said, even at a big star level, he was talking about a recent project he did with David Guetta. And he said Guetta spent a lot of time preparing and writing and producing the current album. And he said what he found, which was something that he had not found before with artists at that level, was that the idea of a David Guetta, even at his level, putting an album out. He said what has happened in the world and the culture of streaming consumption that we live in today is that the consumption process has become so accelerated that he said within 8 to 10 weeks, the audience had gone through practically every track. And he said, and we have the data to back that up, that he said what we began seeing on the sites and on social media is, when are you coming with the next one? When are you coming with the next one? When are you And it's like this, like, you know, spit it up and push it out and next. And he said, you know, he said it made us realize that perhaps this wasn't the right approach, even with people at that level on a worldwide basis. Perhaps it's not right just to come with this large body of work and say, here it is. You know, that maybe it was something that we should hold back and just put, you know, track after track and really market and give context to each of those in a way that we weren't doing. He said, you know, because he said it's creatively and business wise, you cannot put out records every, you know, 8 weeks. That's impossible at that level. So it's just interesting hearing you, because even at a big level,
yeah, the
whole model of albums or body of work, and maybe it's the genre of the artist that he is, doesn't seem to work. The consumption is too quick.
Yeah. And it's, and yeah, like, you know, as you said, you know, it's like, that would be pretty expensive to make, you know, a David Guetta record every 8 weeks. So I think you have to be strategic with it. I think, you know, yeah, it's singles. It's not necessarily doing an album. You know, it's definitely, it's that in pop music and dance music and you know, rhythmic music. I think that's becoming, the new challenge, I think, is being able to stay relevant when you're at that level, because these guys are used to, like, you know, spending like, you know, 6 months making an album, and it's like you can't go away for 6 months anymore.
And the songs are having a shorter shelf life now. Yeah. The minute they come out, a record comes out, that's it. It's like you're done in a week. And, you know, this is something that's taken 2, 3, 4 years of my life to write and get together. And, you know, within a matter of a week, that's it. It's over.
Yeah. Yeah.
They addressed this in an interview. I guess it was about when Ariana Grande put the last record out. They did an interview with Scooter, and he said, you know, the question was, you know, how did you manage, or how did Ariana Grande manage to get an entire record written, recorded, mixed, mastered, and out within 6 months? He said, well, she really wanted to do it because, and this was interesting in relation to what we're talking about. He said, because we realized, from a business point of view, she was not going to be available for any recording for the next 9 to 12 months, because she's doing a 152-date world tour. So that's out. So the possibility of that was, you know, we either, you know, tour off the last record, which she didn't want to do, or, you know, she speeds this whole thing up and puts another full album out, which, as you know, an artist at that superstar level, to do that in 6 months, even that is like unbelievable that she was able to get something out that quickly, fully done, 12 songs.
Yep. 100%. I mean, and it has to definitely do with her getting what it takes to stay where she's at.
Precisely. Let me ask you something, Alex. As a manager, how important is it for you to understand the culture of the audience that your artist connects with?
I think it's more than ever. I think it's important for the manager to really understand that world where their artist is coming from, because you're on the front lines. You're for a long time, like we said, you're the label. You're, you know, and you know, that being said, if you're not real, it's just it's going to be a forced thing. You know, so I, you know, especially with management now, you know, I definitely tend to get in, you know, go with, you know, and well, one, it's, you know, I go with a lot of things that I just genuinely love musically. And it tends to be things that I understand the scenes behind them. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how it would be hard to do that any other way.
Let me ask you, Alex, is live performance essential if you're going to break as an artist?
Ultimately, you know, if you really want to break big, you're going to have to get out there and perform. There's going to have to be a live visual. People are going to want to see. I mean, there's a ceiling. There's going to be a ceiling to, you know, if you don't have some sort of live show. I think, do you need to get in a van and just go around the country, like you used to? No, I think there's other more strategic ways, to do things. But I do believe playing shows and especially like, I really believe in bands or artists coming from somewhere, and representing, somewhere where they're from. And, I think if you're a great artist, I would think that the people in your community will support you, and you'd probably have some great shows. So I don't know why you wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I mean, last year I did a panel at Muse Expo, and Pete Ganbarg was on there, and he talked about this very thing with 21 Pilots. He said, when we first saw, long before the first signing, he said they had, like Beatlemania in Columbus, Ohio. He said it was insane. They had really built up a very, very strong live following. And he said what was fascinating is he said, our faith in the signing of that, when Janik signed them to Ramen, he said, our faith was based on the fact that they had built this. And he said, and when we put the first record out, going back, 4 albums, and we went to the first show, which was in Philadelphia, he said there was like 7 people that showed up, It had not translated, but he said, we knew that, you have to build that. But the live aspect, I mean, you take a band like that, the live aspect is more crucial than streams or social or anything else in that particular world. You were involved with, Fall Out Boy, and you gave the illustration of that, before their record deal, that they were doing huge business live. I mean, I think that's, today especially, that's absolutely crucial.
Yeah, I mean, and just from a revenue stream, I mean, that's really where you can make the lion's share of your money as an artist. So I think if it's something that you're pursuing, if you're pursuing to try to make a career as an artist, I definitely would be recommending whatever genre it is, perfecting your live show and making it great.
Let me ask you something about, historically. I mean, you've been an A&R, a publisher. What, from that point of view, when you were signing things, how important was an artist's team when you were considering signing them? Their manager, their agent, their attorney, their publisher. Did those things factor in if you were considering signing things when you were an A&R executive?
No, I mean, it was always, the music first. And, if they had an awesome lawyer or manager already on board, or a booking agent, that was a bonus. But usually, even, if we signed something and they didn't have that whole team, and, a lot of times they didn't, I was confident in sharing that music with my friends that are managers, booking agents, and lawyers, and, helping, the band put together a really awesome team. I always felt like we would be able to pull the team together, when the music was great. So.
Yeah, let me ask you, Alex, today, how much of a fan base does an artist need before they can tour, do you feel, in your estimation?
I mean, I wouldn't be out there I would be starting to do things regionally. I mean, for touring, I think you really should be coming from somewhere and developing a following in your hometown, and then kind of branching out, it's kind of, you conquer the city before you conquer the state, before you conquer the country, kind of thing. And that's sort of how I see it now, because it doesn't, if you're from, if you're a band from Virginia Beach, or if you're a band from New York, or if you're a band from Philly, and you're going to go on the road and you're going to play a bunch of shows, you're going to go play Phoenix, Arizona, you're going to go on tour and play Phoenix, Arizona, you're going to drive all the way out there. You better know that you're going to come back and play Phoenix, Arizona again, or you're just wasting a lot of gas money. And
right,
because it takes more than one show. So I think it's more about focusing your efforts.
Let me ask you, does artist development in your mind, Alex, does it differ from genre to genre?
Not really. I mean, I think generally speaking, artists, the needs are all kind of the same, whether you're a rock band or you're a hip hop artist. It's music. So I think, having, these things, all these things we've spoken about today, having the narrative and, having a live show and, developing those things and developing the fan base. I mean, it's hand-to-hand combat no matter what it is,
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you, today as a manager, have you found certain international territories in the world are more open to newer artists or specific styles of music than others?
Yeah. I think, I've found, in Southeast Asia and Japan and Australia, there's a quite an affinity for a lot of American music. So I find, culturally, I've seen a lot of synergy there. But also, I've seen Germany be a really great country for a lot of artists to get some traction as well in early days.
Alex, I want to ask you sort of a personal, professional question, which is that, you've been in this profession long enough, and to you, what are the qualities that make a great A&R person? What are they to you?
It really is going to come down to having passion for the music, for the artists. And I think if you don't have that, it's a hard job. I know it seems like a job that it could be, can be a glamorous, great job. But I think if you don't have the passion and the commitment and the drive for the music and for the artists, and really, really believe it, there's a lot of folks that I think, they may not even like music, but they somehow got a job doing A&R. It's amazing. But
wow. I would hate to have the job of A&R. I mean, having been an A&R person myself, I'd hate to have the job if you really don't like music. I mean, have you ever met an A&R person that didn't like music, really?
There's a couple people that I've wondered about, for sure.
Wow. That's fascinating.
But I think, to make a great A&R, I think you got to love the music. I mean, I've been really fortunate to work with some amazing guys that were just real music guys, real record guys that truly love what they do. And I think those are the guys and girls, women, men that artists want to work with. They want to work with people that are committed and passionate and are and driven to help these people achieve their dreams. Because I mean, at the end of the day, like you're trying to help someone achieve a childhood dream, and it should be taken really seriously.
It's interesting as you're speaking about that. I did A&R at Arista, and I remember once Clive Davis, who's kind of a renowned executive in terms of being a record man. I mean, him, Ahmet Ertegun, Berry Gordy. I mean, these are like people historically who have been acknowledged as record men. And he was asked this question, and he said, look, he said, one of the things that I realized, he said, I have a specific skill set, but he said, it's not the only skill set that works in my position. He said, I have tremendous respect for David Geffen, he said, who doesn't have my skill sets. He's not a record man per se, like, Ahmed or myself or Barry, but he said, David has phenomenal instincts about talent. That's a different skill set. He said, when I look at Jimmy Iovine, I think not only does he have great instincts, but Jimmy's actually one who has skill sets that none of us have. He can actually go into the studio and make the record. That's something quite different. That's a different kind of skill set. So it's almost like, when you look at like different producers, some can write the song, some can, put their stamp on it, some just know how to bring out the best in an artist, but there's not one particular way of being a great A&R person. It's almost like, your skill sets, there's many spokes to the center of the wheel was his point.
Yeah. And I mean, that's what I'm saying, it's hard to pinpoint like really specific, traits other than really just having, the people you mentioned. I mean, these are passionate music.
Yeah.
That like lived it and, are the greats. And it's, yeah, the skills can vary, but the passion for the job is and the just the understanding of the commitment that you're taking when you sign up with an artist, those are the things that are important.
Alex, I wanted to ask you, are there any specific books or videos or programs that you think or that you'd like to recommend that artists should be reading to educate themselves? Are there any that come to mind or that you're really passionate about or really find value in?
There's only one that I recommend to young music executives, and it is All You Need to Know About the Music Business. You probably heard of it, by Donald Passman.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
It's the Bible.
It's funny. I have a first edition that Don gave me when that book came out in the 90s, I think. I still have it on my bookshelf, and it's like in its 8th or 9th edition now. Yeah.
You know what? And it wouldn't matter. You could still, to me, I picked that book up. There's always something in there that you could pull from there.
Absolutely. Okay.
Alex, what have your biggest mistakes taught you?
Listen to my gut more. When I don't go with my gut, when I should have done something a little differently, and it wasn't, I didn't listen to my first instinct. Not all the time, but usually is, I've learned that I need to go with my gut.
Interesting. Okay.
Do you think this is a good time for new artists to come into the market? I mean, are you excited about the times that we're in? And I'm asking that question of you specifically because you're somebody who has inside history with this business and has seen it go through the transformations. Are you excited about the era that we're in specifically, or that the era that we're heading into as far as new artists and bands and talent?
Absolutely.
Okay. And why?
Well, when I first started, doing A&R, there was like the death of the CD. So I was like, and all the older A&R guys that have been around, they're like, man, you got in the business at the wrong time, dude.
Right.
And, it was definitely scary. I watched a lot of, I watched the labels close and merge and all that stuff. And now it's, we've kind of come out on the other side, and there's the idea of starting a record label doesn't sound so scary anymore. 10 years ago, people would be like, yeah, I'm going to start a record label. Be like, you're out of your mind. So I think it's now is a great time for people to be, getting educated about what's available and the resources that are just there for artists and managers and developing booking agents and attorneys. The attorneys are extremely, extremely important in an artist's career. I think having a great attorney is more valuable to me than being signed up with a label, especially in early days.
Okay. For artists who are serious about having a life in music, what advice do you have for them?
Be patient, and you don't know what the thing that's going to be the thing that makes everything start kind of happening. You don't know what that thing is going to be. And you should be just open-minded and stay creative, and if, no matter what, you have to be patient, because again, you don't know what the song, what show, what person, what thing that's going to lead to another thing that's going to lead to another thing. And that's, one of the things that, I talk to artists I work with all the time about. It's like, just kind of staying the course. The only way to make this happen is by making it happen. It's not going to happen by sitting at home. And not writing songs and not playing shows. Like,
yeah, you're playing the long game. It's a marathon, not a race.
It really is, and you have to. And I want to work with artists that want to go through the steps. If you're looking for it to happen short and fast, it's probably you're not going to have a long career. I mean, you could have a big career. It may not be a long one. I enjoy watching artists and working with artists. Like, I want to work with artists over 10, 20 years. Like, I don't want to work with someone and get super close and invested and, watch their career, come and go in 2 years. Like, hopefully it's a good 2 years, but, I'd like to be in it for longer than that and really develop something bigger.
Yeah. It's interesting. You see a lot of people's careers who unfortunately, and we don't have to name names, that's happened to, where, like somebody put the accelerator pedal, floored it on their career, and their career was over in 3 years, when if they'd made different decisions, just, creatively, business-wise, financially, they could have had a career a lot longer. It's, Bob Lefsetz writes about that a lot, of the lost art of saying no.
Yeah.
To certain things, as it applies to this particular silo of our conversation, Alex, where, you say yes to too many things. I mean, it reminds me of the interview I read, which I thought was a very wise realization and self-awareness with Beyonce one time, where she said, I made the mistake very early when I got really hot of saying yes to way, way too many things. And she said, and it dawned on me one night after a gig, somewhere, she said, in the middle of nowhere, and I pulled into a 7-Eleven, and she said, and getting, some drink or something, she said, I saw 3 magazine covers staring back at me of myself. And she said, and I realized, I had gone too far. I had given too much access, too much too soon. And she said, and there's blowback from that. And she said, and I realized in that moment, there is something to be said about less is more. And it's interesting, here you're hearing that from somebody who's probably one of the biggest stars in the world. And I think it's one of the reasons she has lasted, 15, 16 years after making that statement, is because she didn't floor her career to a red light like so many have, out of the fear that, oh my God, I'll never have this again. I better say yes to everything. And then, like you said, the career is big, but it's awfully short.
Yeah. And Beyonce also knew, she was going to have bigger records coming down the road. So it's exactly, she knew that she needed to be cautious.
Precisely. I wanted to ask you about the John Varvatos situation. That was a unique kind of situation. Here you were working for a record label that was part of an entirely different business entity, not even entertainment, but it was part of a fashion empire, and a legendary one within the culture. How did you find working at a label of that orientation different from your experiences working in the record business, which were more traditionally oriented? Were there any distinctions that stood out in your mind?
It was really, there were, the main difference was, really, just working in tandem with another company that wasn't a record label. So, really, it was a learning experience, one, to learn about that world, but being able to kind of help funnel opportunities between, so the deal was with Republic. We had, full resources at Republic, and to be able to kind of go back and forth between this massive fashion machine and this massive record label, and explore all these opportunities. It opened more doors than a normal situation would have. And also John being so hands-on, it was, he also has the ability to open up doors that, not everyone would be able to open for their artists. So the access to, certain things and people, it was, that was a really amazing luxury.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if you were involved with the signing with Badflower, because they've been having a lot of success on rock radio. Were you involved in that project? And could you tell us a little bit about it if you were?
Yeah, I was involved in signing them. Rob Stevenson had played a song for, it was an A&R at the A&R executive at Republic, had played John and I this song that had just gotten played on locals, K-Rock Locals Only with Cat Corbett. And we were just blown away by the song, and went and saw them, had them come out and play a show with like a showcase for John, which was like a big event that he was putting on, had them play. We ended up putting out the first record.
Yeah, and I think they've had a couple of #1 rock songs on rock radio, I believe.
Yeah, they're doing awesome. I'm really stoked for them.
Alex, let me ask you, where can people best connect with you, on socials or otherwise?
I'm kind of an Instagram guy for the most part. It's just my name at Instagram. Alex Shenitsky at Instagram.
And how is that spelled?
SHENITSKY.
Okay, so Instagram, that's the best place to connect with you.
Yeah, that's usually where I spend my social media time. I'm not on Facebook that much. I'm not on Twitter that much. They're there, but I just don't tend to use them as much. But I'm also on my email, which is also my last name at Gmail.
Okay, great. I really want to thank you for taking the time to do this. This was a great conversation.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you so much. You know what I loved about this interview? In terms of a podcast, I chose Alex because of his background.
Right.
Alex is one of those people who is now managing acts, but he has seen it from many sides. He has seen it from the label side. He has seen it from the independent label side. He has seen it from the music publishing side, and now he's seeing it as a manager.
Yeah.
And so he brings to, the conversation that we just listened to, a lot of very, very interesting points and perspectives that I don't think not everyone can bring those because their background is a little
in one
different.
area.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
in one area.
I mean, for instance, the most interesting thing when the conversation began was the whole aspect of how managers today have a far, far greater responsibility and a far greater role in the early development of artists' careers.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I mean, it's a huge responsibility. I mean, you're thinking about everything. Not only is it about you're not assembling a team, you are the team initially. You are the booking agent, you are the publicist, you're doing all those roles. So yeah, I definitely agree on that. And you have to come in as the early cheerleader, the early believer in believing in the project. So I think there's a lot of that going on. So yeah, the manager plays a huge role.
Not only do they play a huge role, it's also the idea that, so many artists think, well, if I just had a manager, somehow my career would just manifest.
Exactly. Yeah.
It would just happen. If,
right.
if Irving Azoff, or whoever managed me, they would give me a career. I mean, It's not articulated that way, but it's thought
perceived.
of that way.
It's perceived. The perception is like that.
And he made a very interesting point. He said, especially early on, and especially today, there's a lot of dots to connect.
Right.
Especially today. A
Exactly.
lot of dots, whether it's, strategy or recording or touring or building the social media or the marketing or the content creation. I mean, there's a lot of dots to do that. And, an established manager isn't necessarily going to have the time to be able to take that on. So, you want to be able to find someone who just believes in what you're doing musically. And I know that that's a challenge for a lot of people, listening. It's, you have to get out there. You have to show. The best way to attract a manager, I feel, is to be out there showing that, you're willing to do the work.
Definitely. And I thought all the other things that he brought up in that section of the interview where it was giving the power back to the artist and that you don't really need a label, which is something that we're going to harp on quite a bit about because everybody is still in that phase of like, my God, I got to get signed to a label. Not really. You can build this on your own. So,
and the label, and we'll get into this in future conversations. The label today, ladies and gentlemen, expects and requires an immense amount of time, effort, energy, and commitment on your part in ways that you haven't even thought of yet.
Exactly.
If they're going to get behind you.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you want our support? You want the support of Universal? Okay, here's the 4 pages of stuff we need from you.
Exactly.
And you better be prepared to do that.
Yep.
And that's the part that this kind of training that he's talking about in the early stages really helps prepare you for.
Yeah, and I thought one of the other really great aspects of this interview was when we were talking about the personal narrative of an act or artist. I mean, this one was a big one because
crucial.
In this day and age, again, ladies and gentlemen, there has to be a message behind what it is you're doing. What that message is, well, that's what you're there to find and what you're trying to work through. And I think one of the biggest things, what he says and why these artists break, like a Cardi B and Katy Perry and all these, that they feel that there's an innate deep connection with the audience feels a deep connection to them because they've opened them up into their world.
That's right. I mean, look at Megan Thee Stallion.
Exactly.
Look at Cardi B. Look at Billie Eilish. Look at Ariana Grande. I mean, you talk about a personal narrative. I mean, the world thought of her as just, another little pretty pop star until she went through all of these horrific, elements of, her boyfriend committing suicide or dying of a drug overdose, of the horrific thing of a terrorist bomb killing 22 people at a concert of her. I mean, she has to live with that for the. Right. I mean, those are the kinds of horrific things, and she came through it. And, as a person, and I think those kinds of things, trust me, nobody ever wants to go through those kinds of things, but they really bonded her. And I want to emphasize the point that you just made, Eric, because it's so important. You have to give your audience today a reason beyond your music to love you and to connect with you. And I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't have that, perhaps this isn't, just because music's fun or you like, maybe this is not the profession for you. Not in today's day and age. This isn't the era when only a few, got chosen. This is an era when anyone and everyone can do it. And if you can't provide that, I don't know, how
you have to be a great
succeed.
Communicator.
Yeah,
you have to be a great communicator and know what your message is and live it and just, breathe it.
Absolutely.
You have to embody it.
That can't be emphasized enough. The other thing that I thought was very interesting from a time perspective is that in the past, when it came to A&R and labels, you did need to have your team together. And one of the things that he said, which I thought was so interesting, and this is a guy who comes from that era, comes from major label, comes from the A&R perspective,
right,
is that, number one, if you have great music that they are absolutely in love with,
you can build a team around
You
that.
can build a team around it. People will be attracted. You can always find a great manager. You can find a great attorney to work with.
Right.
But that the number one most important factor when you're trying to build a team is having great music.
Yeah.
That's the absolute crucial thing. And that's a change from, getting signed in the past.
Exactly.
In previous eras.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And that it's, the music first. And, and he mentioned that if you happen to have a team member or an early believer like a manager or something, great that you already have somebody on board and then you can build from there. But the great news is that, the music speaks for itself. If the music is great, they will build it around that and people will come, which is our message that we keep saying, everybody trying to go after like, oh my God, if this A&R could just hear this music, they'll sign me. Just make great music. People will eventually come to you and find out who you are,
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And the fact that he's emphasizing that in this day and age when it's, it's more difficult than ever to get people's attention, but you have to it's like when you do get their attention, you have to do it with something that is great, which is your art.
Yeah.
That's the key.
Yeah, and I think another point that he brought up that was really good too was kind of midway through the interview, which was, how do artists identify who their audience is? And I think this one is a crucial one. And I thought it was an interesting take that he said that he just said, you don't always know. And I thought that was an interesting twist because typically, that's one of the first things you're trying to delineate is who, what wheelhouse do you fall into?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it was fascinating that he spoke about, that they find you. Of course, you want to do the things that, you think are necessary to connect with people of similar values or, whether it's musically or lyrically. But, this is also the thing where when he talks about they will find you, you got to think about that. You got to think, who do you want? Who would you ideally like?
Right.
In a perfect world, if you sat down, who would you want?
Who's your ideal avatar?
Yeah, as a fan.
Right.
Age, type of background, what
their
are the
beliefs,
values, their
lifestyles.
beliefs. Absolutely. Right. All of that is crucial and be able to target those people as well. And, also be open to, a lot of times, artists have found that they're attracting a certain type of audience that they never, ever anticipated.
Right. Exactly.
And that goes to the whole point of, they find you.
Hey Insiders, thanks so much for tuning into this episode. We really appreciate it. To get show notes, links, and everything that was mentioned during this interview, head on over to our official website at mubutv.com/podcast/show notes. If you're enjoying the content and what we're doing here on the show, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts from. And don't forget to rate and review our show over at iTunes. 5-star reviews are always welcome and help to ensure that our podcast stands out on the top-rated and new and noteworthy charts on iTunes in our space. You can also find us on social media at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all ending with the handle MUBUTV, which is spelled MUBUTV. Don't forget to catch our flagship show, the MUBUTV Insider Video Series, airing every week on YouTube at youtube.com/MUBUTV. This show was produced and created by Ritch, Esra, and Eric Knight. This show would not be here if it weren't for our amazing team, which are the following: interview editors Sarah Nissenbaum and Alex Taylor, show notes and transcriptions by Jani Chang, Nicole Capodoglo, Lilia Owens, and Sarah Nissenbaum, theme music by Disciples of Babylon, and be sure to tune in next week for another episode of the MUBUTV Insider Podcast.